All right, let's call the March meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District to order, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. David Bergstrom.
Here.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
Thomas Stover.
Here.
Mark Finkel.
Here.
Michael Clark.
Here.
Robert Hudson.
Here.
Robert Fulton.
Here.
John Hodgson.
Here.
Carol Wright.
Here.
Richard Ferrara. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. I need a motion to adopt or revise the meeting agenda today. Is any revisions?
I'll make that motion.
No.
I'll second.
Okay.
First was
Albert.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Stover.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. I'd ask for guests, but I have no one to ask for. No public comments, which is surprising. All right. So I need an approval of the organization. Should we do two separate motions here, or can I just do both on one?
You can do them
Both together?
if you wish.
Sure. Approval of the organizational and regular meeting minutes from February.
I'll
Or
make the
January.
motion.
Mr. Finkel.
Second.
Mr. Hayes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you. All right. For the apportionment consent, should I refer to you, Mr. Clark?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. We bring to the board a draft resolution to consider a modification of the Hudson River area apportionment and adoption of that apportionment by consent, ultimately. If I think at this point it's good to recap where we have been with this process. Again, there will be before the board now, there's a draft of a resolution to approve an apportionment for the Hudson River area with modification. And if you recall, that modification is of the apportionment initially adopted by the board in 2010, March of 2010, 3 years ago now, 3 long years ago now. And if you recall, and everyone does recall, that apportionment from March 2010 was challenged by the 5 counties. It was upheld. Our right to apportion the counties was upheld by the Saratoga County Supreme Court in a decision of April 2011, and that decision was appealed by the 5 counties, and the Appellate Division, 3rd Department, ruled on that appeal with a decision last year in May of 2012. That decision is an interesting one. What it did essentially was uphold the regulating district's right to apportion for flood protection of the 5 counties, with one caveat, that being that the apportionment at that time, the March 2010 apportionment, did not include or an amount chargeable to the state, and therefore return the apportionment to us, to the regulating district, for staff to make that modification. We did do that. In July of last year, 2012, the board's finance committee considered a modification to the original, to the March 2010 apportionment with the New York State share, and and that committee recommended the adoption to the full board. If you remember, during that meeting from last July, and I realize it's a long time ago now, the board's State Environmental Quality Review, the determination of significance was that there would be no adverse effect on the environment, that apportionment adopted in 2012 utilized the same methodology for apportioning among the 5 counties that the Appellate Division, 3rd Department, determined to be rational. The board determined that the amount chargeable to the state at that time, in July 2012, remember, was 11.96% of the regulating district's Hudson River area costs. The board's July 2012 calculated the reasonable return to the state to be $0, and the board elected to not separately break out the expenses and beneficiaries associated with the Indian Lake Reservoir. At that time, in July of last year, the board adopted that apportionment with those with that amount chargeable to the state, and submitted the apportionment to DEC for certification, which was done. Subsequently, and as everyone remembers, last September, I believe it was at the Warren County Office Building, board convened an apportionment grievance hearing for the Hudson River area, September 21st actually, and each of the 5 counties that are named in the apportionment were represented at that hearing by the firm, by one special counsel, the firm of Miller, Mannix, Shackner, Hafner of Glens Falls. If you take a look at if you refer back to the minutes of that meeting last September, September 2012, you'll remember what the specific concerns that the 5 counties brought to the board for consideration, the concerns that they had about that apportionment, again, that was adopted last July. We believe that this apportionment does specifically address those concerns. To summarize, at that meeting, counsel and a consultant for the 5 counties challenged some math errors, including what they considered to be inappropriate inflation of the value of non-state properties because they were double counted in the tax rolls, and placements of state land, and specifically there was an issue raised about the Albany Port Commission properties being on the non-state side of the ledger, meaning effectively booked or accounted for under the county's share, specifically Albany County's. The minutes also raised additional issues, 4 additional issues in their written complaint, and preserved but didn't specifically address at the hearing by their counsel. At that point, at the end of that meeting, or at the end of that grievance hearing, you members decided to table the matter so that staff could return to the work table and examine those concerns raised. At that point, or following that meeting, you also want to remember that and again, it's a whole timeline issue, but if there was still a request for leave to appeal to New York State Court of Appeals. If you remember, the September meeting was after the decision from the Appellate Division, 3rd Department, but there was still a request for leave or motion for leave to appeal to the New York State Court of Appeals, and that was still pending. On October 30th, that leave was denied. October 30th of last year. So shortly after that meeting, staff put our heads together. We, the staff, put our heads together and examined point by point each of the concerns that were brought to the board during that September meeting. There were two memorandums to the board dated November 9th. These two memos, one from myself and staff and the other from council, provided the board with the basis and the documentation to support a modification to the amount chargeable to the state, the New York State share. And it addressed each of the remaining issues point by point raised by the 5 counties. These are the same memorandum and documents provided to the board in anticipation of the board's December 11th meeting. And copies of these documents, these memorandums, were also provided to the 5 counties council via email on November 9th. And have been, they're posted on our website for public use and dissemination, and have been since that time. If you look at the first memo, the 2012 Hudson River Area Great Sacandaga Lake Apportionment Revisions to Non-State Share and State Property Value Inventories dated 11/9/2000, that's a long drawn out, but it's the memo that is specifically addresses the recalculation of the state share. It recommended a separation of the benefit derived by the state from the benefit derived by the counties in order to determine the amount chargeable to the state. In order to separate the flood benefit derived by New York State from the flood benefit, and I should say flood protection benefit, derived by the counties, an inventory of non-state-owned properties and state-owned 100-year without GSL flood protection properties was produced. And again, I want to interject here. If you remember, for everyone in perpetuity, the flood protection benefit calculation is based on the calculation of a flood flow, including flood elevations at points downriver and the extent by elevation to which that flood would extend out from the normal Hudson River if Great Sacandaga Lake was never built and did not exist. And by doing that, it's a measure and a method to determine the actual flood protection value. It's been a long time that we've been working with that, and I'm sure everyone remembers, but we're at the point now where it's certainly worth reminding everyone that that's the concept, that the actual engineering method used to actually identify properties that receive the flood protection benefit as you work your way down 80 some odd miles of river. So in the calculation of the, again, in the recalculation of the further refinement of the New York State share, staff calculated the value of near state-owned bridges and roads and state-owned properties. And essentially, we, in working with state data, we determined if you remember, there was a long discussion, and I realize this isn't flowing well right now, but what I'm trying to say is that the calculation of the value of the state highways that receive flood protection, one of the discussions and the method that was ultimately used to refine that number was to use lane miles of state highway that were actually within the, or received some flood protection benefit. Bridges were based on a square foot cost and actual square footage of the bridge and approaches that sit within the 100-year without GSL floodplain, and of course the state properties are, it's pretty self-explanatory. At that point, and after going through all these calculations and machinations, the staff recalculated the full value of the non-state property to be $3,293,594,628, and the state-owned property to be $262,545,908. And we recommend that the board use these new values to arrive at the Hudson River area apportionment and also calculation of the amount chargeable to the state. And based on these values, the percentage of the cost based on the reworking of the state-owned highways and state-owned bridges, and removing some of the properties that were either incorrectly labeled as county and were actually state, or were doubled up on the county. When all of this was said and done, the percentage of cost chargeable to the state went from the July value of 11.96% to a value of 22.18%. And staff recommends that the board modify the apportionment adopted in July 2012 to reflect that state share, the amount chargeable to the state, to be 22.18%. I realize that's long-winded, but that's how we got from 3 years ago to this point. And just recently, and since late last fall, senior staff of the regulating district and representatives from the 5 counties have had a series of talks and exchanges to negotiate a schedule of payments by the 5 counties to address the amounts assessed, covering the regulating district's fiscal years 2009 through 12, which is now the previous budget cycle, and assessments going forward in the current budget cycle 2012, actually July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2015. The result of these talks is the agreement that we're presenting to the board by the council for the 5 counties of Miller, Manic, Shackner, and Hafner, who represented the 5 counties. Now, I notice that Mr. Shackner is not here. We anticipated that he might be, but we do have that agreement, and that agreement by apportionment consent agreement for the board to review.
The agreement that Mr. Shackner has provided to the board, or is providing to the board today, I guess through me, is the exact same language that you have seen previously.
Is that the one you sent us?
We sent you that
Okay.
late last week. Last night, I received word from Mr. Shackner's partner, Leah Everhart, that she had secured original signatures executed in a like manner as a deed from each of the five county beneficiaries. Each of those legislatures have authorized their respective head, whether that be the county supervisor, the county executive, chairman of the board of supervisors, to execute the agreement. So on 3 different pages, I have original signatures or facsimiles of original signatures from all 5 counties.
Okay.
I have no doubt in my mind that I will receive from them original documents, which we can then file in the manner that we need to file them. I've also received yesterday afternoon confirmation, if that's a word, confirmation
In a word.
from Harris Daig, who is the Assistant Attorney General, who has helped us to work through the litigation with the 5 counties. I've received confirmation from him that both the special counsel for Hamilton County and the assistant county attorney for Fulton County, who are responsible for agreeing to the condition precedent offered in the agreement by the 5 counties, I've received word that they have both acquiesced to our request for a stipulation that Fulton and Hamilton County accept, in payment of the judgments that they have against us for past due taxes, a payment schedule that we can meet. I do not have an original copy of that stipulation, but merely the assurance by our counsel from the Attorney General's office that he does have that agreement in hand.
Good.
So, the agreement is offered to the board for its acceptance or rejection. And the agreement would establish a new apportionment and also set forth the manner in which our assessments would take place for the next 6 years, including the year 1.
Okay.
Right. Anything else? Do you want to further describe it, I guess?
Well, we could certainly describe the terms of the agreement.
Why don't you? Because that'll answer my question about the Black River.
Yeah.
Well, as Mr. Leslie just explained, that what this agreement,
Thanks.
if fully executed and if adopted by the board, it agrees to there are several points in it. Number one, based on the apportionment percentages for each county, they would pay their share of $3.5 million for the previous budget cycle, 2009 through 2012. It further establishes a repayment schedule of previously owed back taxes to Saratoga County. It also establishes a payment schedule going forward. The counties would agree to pay the current year assessment, 12/13, by the end of this month. I don't know the exact date right in front of me.
31st.
31st of this month. And the previous, and the past due amounts by that same date, correct?
15th.
15th. March
Okay,
15th.
that's
March
this
15th
Friday.
past due, correct.
And then, from that point forward,
That's the end of this week?
Correct.
yes, it is, that's this Friday. And from this point forward, pay the assessments on when they're due. Essentially, the end of October of each year, with the exception of Rensselaer County has stipulated that they pay that current year assessment by the end of January of each year, rather than October.
Okay.
It's still within the budget year. It seems to flow with, based on cash flow.
Cash flow.
And
It's bookkeeping.
it's a bookkeeping issue. It's a workable situation. And essentially, and again, I want to remind the board that the fixed annual assessment for the current 3-year budget cycle, total, is $2,994,100 per year. And again, that figure is the amount that's divided 5 ways amongst the county.
That's the county apportion.
That's the,
Okay, the county
that is the
responsibility.
actual remainder that is apportioned. Once the non-assessment income items are deducted from each budget year, and also the amount chargeable to the state.
That's separate, okay. Separate from what the state is responsible for.
Correct.
Yes.
Got it.
And we, the staff, recommend that the board consider this agreement, and there is, I'm sorry I missed a point. One of the points within this agreement is a 2% assessment cap for years going forward.
After our next 3-year budget?
Well, I
Or
mean,
is it-
correct.
right.
Essentially, we've agreed to the same amount to be assessed through 2 budget cycles.
Right.
And beyond that, barring a new apportionment,
Right.
this agreement would establish a 2% maximum increase.
Is that across the board, or is that just tied into whatever the state is
Well, we're talking about the Hudson River area
Right.
apportionment again.
yeah.
We're not, Black River area is separate from this entirely.
Whatever the resulting assessment comes out to be,
Right.
it cannot be any more than a
2%.
2% increase.
Right.
Right. So that doesn't necessarily mean our budget has to stay
Correct.
Right.
no greater than 2%, but just the amounts that we assess
Correct.
to the counties after 2018
Right.
would be limited to
To a 2% increase.
2% increase.
Okay.
There are a couple of other things that this agreement also does. The district's audited balance sheet will reflect an outstanding debt to the state of a little over $2.6 million. And this agreement allows the amounts assessed to the state to be greater than the state share without the balance between the amounts the state pays and the amounts the state is required to pay, counting against non-assessment income and thereby reducing the county's portion until the amounts that are due from the state have been exhausted. So basically, the counties are going to pay their $2.99 for 100 for each of 6 years without respect to the fact that we anticipate the state paying a little bit more than their state share, because that's what they had to do in order for this all to work. By the way, the state has been great. The counties have been really good. The Attorney General has been fantastic in this working through. But essentially, that allowed us to keep that overage until the past due amounts from the state have been exhausted. Another thing this agreement requires us to do is actively work towards minimizing the future assessments to the counties. And there are a number of things that we can try to undertake to generate revenue in other ways or to limit expenses.
As we go forward.
As we go forward.
Some of those are pretty big projects that'll take a lot of effort, and some of them, we have to advocate for, just like anybody else would. Obviously, getting more from the state makes, in the future, makes the amounts due from the counties to be less. As we mentioned, there's the condition precedent, which was that Fulton and Hamilton County had to agree to limit their amounts due. We had to get consent from all of the parties. So we did get consent from each of the 5 parties. And there is no interest due on any back amounts that were due from Saratoga County. Nor are you, the board, allowed to charge interest on the back due assessments from any of the 5 counties. Basically, the interest became a wash, and
That's fine, yeah.
we agreed to none. Because we are establishing the state share, we felt it important that the approval that you offer here be sent to the Commissioner of Environmental Conservation for his approval. It's really the only check that the state has on you, the board, not establishing a state share in collusion with the counties that is far above what we can justify. As Mike outlined earlier, we established a number that we thought was correct. The counties objected to that number. We have now changed the roads number, the bridges number, and the property number such that we can solidly support a 22.18% amount chargeable to the state. If you and the counties wanted to get together and say that number was 85% rather than 22%, we anticipate that the Commissioner of Environmental Conservation might not approve what you'd offer. So that's an additional step that, as you read the statute, is not specifically noted, but when you read the totality of the article, the totality of that title, and specifically Section 1521.21, we believe that the law, that the legislature contemplated that your approval will be sent to DEC for its approval.
To the 22.18, it's approvable solid amount.
Yes.
And anything else would be our prerogative, but
Right. You'd have to justify it. And
unjustifiable. Okay.
we're confident we can justify the 22.18.
Yeah, but
It's
yeah.
bolstered by the fact that the counties have agreed to it. Anyway, I'm sorry for
No, it's.
stealing your thunder there.
think that matter at this point is before we present this to the board. And there's Mr. Ferrara's points that he still has to make. But
Just a couple things.
Go for it.
In accepting this consent, and this is, I'll just quickly paraphrase my memo on page 23, and this is basically the consent agreement from a cash flow perspective and some of the implications. This does come at a cost. Accepting, and particularly accepting less than what the board could have held out for previous 3 years. So I just want to talk specifically about what the consent agreement now is going to require in terms of payment of past-due expenses during this kind of short period of time, the balance of this year through the end of this cycle, which is June 30th, 2015. There's several material Hudson River balance sheet liabilities for that past period, 9 through 12. And again, as I indicated in my memo, and this is in no particular order, it's the pass-through taxes to Fulton and Hamilton County, and that'll be paid. We don't have the stipulation, but right now it looks like it would be about $1.78 million over 2 years. There will be the pass-through Saratoga County taxes in the amount of $2.8 million, and that'll be over 2.5 years. So you can see how this is all comes in this current cycle. And then there'll be initial payments to the Black River area for their note payable for the $3.045 million that was borrowed from the Black River to pay the initial Fulton County pass-through taxes. That's approximately $371,000, and that will happen probably between July of this year and November or October of this year, and that again is to get Black River over a cash flow period that otherwise they could have some issues. And again, during this period, albeit we're going to have a revenue stream in place, the revenue stream in place is basically designed for a typical 1, 2, 3 year budget disbursement cycle. Again, because we're packing all of these past due things in this current cycle, amounts that would be typically available to pay outright certain capital projects would not be available.
Right.
That's not to say that the Hudson River area and the Black River area both will not have the ability to perform capital projects. Funding we may go about the funding in a different fashion. A lot of that remains to be seen as to how that plays out, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. But again, the bottom line, and this consent also requires a couple of fiscal housekeeping items. One is going to be, and we can probably do this very quickly, following the board's, if the board is going to accept the consent, one would be to revise the budget for the current cycle, because it now has to reflect the state share. The other item would be a motion that I would offer the board to restructure the Black River area note. And that restructuring would be critical in maintaining the cash flow necessary for both watersheds. So again, the bottom line is, I mean, we clearly accepted less than the board and the budget would have called for in a previous 3 year budget. But again, in accepting that, we've established a revenue stream for the Hudson River area of over $5.5 million a year. And that revenue stream is going to enable the district to perform its mission and to pay property and school taxes past due and current without there being any additional delays. So and we all felt that was paramount and accepted. And I will wait for the board, and then we can go for these a couple of housekeeping items.
All right, for the record, how soon before we can adjust the Black River's apportionment? payment?
That will be, I believe, effective upon approval of the consent. I believe we've already kept through March, so it would be no later than fiscal April.
Okay.
No later than. I'm not sure. It could be fiscal March, but I have to look at whether or not we have to
Okay.
do any little homework on that. But
I understand we were juggling entities and trying to be fair to the taxpayers, trying to be fair, but get our bills paid.
Mr. Chairman, to our CFO's point, we have this agreement, this consent, and apportionment going forward is, yes, it's a compromise.
Absolutely.
And particularly, and specifically in the amounts past due. The point to, number one, not forget, is that it establishes those assessments going forward until such time as there's a new apportionment, and that's huge. It came about as a result of a negotiation. That negotiation certainly takes into account the needs and wants of both sides, or circumstances at the very least. It takes into account the impact that this apportionment of cost has on the Hudson River area beneficiaries, the 5 counties now. And it also recognizes the significant cutbacks and the staff reductions that the regulating district has experienced over the last 3 years, and not just staff, but cutbacks in every area. Going forward, it will allow us to perform our mission, and that's why we're here. And remember, that mission is to regulate the flows in the Hudson River and the Black River, and we're talking about the Hudson here, in terms of financing it. And we will still be able to maintain those structures that allow us to do it. And as Mr. Farrar, and although our chief engineer is silent right now, there will be improvements necessary without a doubt, and they are coming. And I'm confident that we're still going to be able to do it, that we will do it, and make those when they're established and when they become capital projects.
Question for...
Yes, sir.
How are these write-offs going to affect our ability to fund some of these capital projects in the future?
I think it's a timing issue, so I'm going to once the dust settles,
Right.
get back to the office. I will work with our independent auditor to see exactly how we're going to go about the write-offs of the current Hudson River area assessments that are on the balance sheet. And clearly, there will be some write-offs. We've already taken some write-offs against bad debt, but again, at the time we did that, there was no contemplation that we would be accepting the deal that we accepted. But so once we determine exactly how we go about the write-offs, and there's certainly not a lot of flexibility there.
No.
But there has been enough transactional activity at year-end during our audit that we need to go through that and see exactly what's additional to write off. Then it's a matter of time. I mean, as months and a year goes by, those write-offs I think will be less impactful on folks that we would bring in to, quote, underwrite a bond, for example.
Right.
And I've noticed 2 things about bonds since we've gone through this, since probably 2009. There's a lot of them, and the interest rates are finally starting to creep up. Again, rates are still very, very low. So either way, high or low, the competition is fierce. And again, we're not going to know until we sit down. And we used the fiscal advisor last time around. not sure how we would procure this out, but again, we're not looking at doing a bond
Right.
tomorrow.
No.
So, I mean, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but suffice it to say, there will be some impact on our ability to bond. Will
Right.
it prevent us from bonding?
No.
Absolutely not.
Okay, good.
Absolutely not.
Can I just, I want to get clear in my mind, Saratoga County. Okay? They're not actually giving us a check, or they're giving us a check?
They are not giving us a check. So all of the amounts, so the past due amount, as indicated on the apportionment.
I've got it.
Is $1 million, I believe, $1,210,824. That amount will be credited against the past due taxes that we owe them, which is $2.8 million and change. Right. They will pay us nothing, we just don't pay them those taxes.
Correct,
They're gonna-
correct,
So,
correct.
each time there is a payment that would have typically been forthcoming from Saratoga to the district, they will take that amount. For example, the very next, the first year assessment of $1,035,809, which would be due pursuant to the consent at the end of the month, will also be credited against that $2.8 million.
And just
Current,
as,
and a portion of the current due taxes, and a portion of the million, for example, when the next assessment becomes due.
Correct.
That's what I'm
So, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you,
No.
but, so as we are capped on how much we can increase our apportionment down the road, are they capped as to how much they can increase
Taxes?
the taxes to us?
Again, taxes is subject to, the Office of Real Property Taxes.
Okay.
And they oversee that. And generally, quite frankly, as I've looked at the taxes since I've been here since 2005, those increases have been fairly nominal. So, I mean, there's some strict controls on.
They are constrained by the tax cap imposed by, and the statutory site is in there
Right.
somewhere.
Okay, it is.
Right.
And we are also now agreeing to be subject to a similar tax cap.
Correct.
Our responsibility to adhere to that cap is broken really in two ways. One, an emergency circumstance. Something happens where we have to do something and can't because we don't have the money. Or the state relaxes its tax cap. So as long as they're subject to it, we're subject to
Okay.
it.
It's not an objection, I just.
And then at the end of the cycle, this cycle, June 30th, 2015, whatever is left of that past due tax payable to, I'm sorry, there's also a $500,000 payment we will make against the past due by June of this year. Then, at the end of the 3-year cycle, June 30, 2015, whatever is left due payable back, which I'm estimating to be around $800,000 and change, will be paid to. So again, there's that significant outlay, disbursement of those balance sheet liabilities in that very short period of time.
Okay.
But we will be clearing them up.
Correct. We'll be clearing them up and also paying our current taxes as due. That's the
Right.
important thing. We're not then, oh God, now we're
Yeah.
pushing out. We're not. I've also added, I will be adding on the cash flow report, and I can probably say this in my report, but it's probably timely. I will be adding an average fund balance for Hudson and Black River, and what the balance would be if you just averaged it for a particular fiscal year. Gives the board a sense, actually gave me a sense that things may be a little better than even I thought. But again, these cash flows as they are,
Right.
they're accurate going out months, then a year. Then as you get out beyond that, there's a lot of guesswork involved.
Yeah.
So, and I've gone out quite a ways, as you can see in your report, out to 2019.
Right. Any other questions?
No, I have
No, you've answered most of mine. It's hard for me because I want to get some of it on record, and I've been in conversations with a couple of you. Rick, I didn't bother because I figured he was having too much fun juggling numbers. But Okay, so let's proceed from here.
There's a resolution on page 14 of your board packet, which continues on to page 19 of your board packet. Quite possibly the longest resolution I've drafted for the board in the
It was the most whereases I've ever read, Norris.
4 years I've been here. On page 17, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th whereas down, on the last line of that, whereas has the dates upon which a first and second installment will be paid to Fulton and Hamilton County.
Yep,
Those dates both should be March 31st.
instead of the 15th and the 1st.
Instead of the
Right. We may make payment before then, but,
But that's when we scheduled it to be due.
yeah, I mean,
We're going to make every effort.
we'll make every effort. Assuming you pass the resolution today, we send it to DEC, DEC turns it around to us pretty quickly. We then serve the apportionment with a copy of the agreement upon each county clerk, actually file with the county clerk. We'll also provide a courtesy copy to each county attorney, which will trigger a bill, which then they will pay. If that all gets done by Friday and the check's all clear right away, I suspect Rick will turn around and write checks right away.
Good.
If that takes extra days, that's where the delay is coming.
We can act quickly. It's the
And
OSC process.
And OSC processing.
They countersign every check, so hopefully we can get them to expedite these.
Okay.
Right. So, but we will get it done as quickly as possible. Carol, you also had a change in the resolution. I believe on
On
page
the fourth.
16, the fourth one down.
Yep.
What did you want on that?
Well, I suspect it needs to say the amount chargeable, the fourth paragraph on page 16.
Got it.
Whereas upon hearing the name beneficiaries' grievances, the regulated district board has determined the amount chargeable to the state to be 22.18% of the regulating district's estimated annual cost in operation and maintenance. I believe that should be regulating districts, Hudson River
Hudson
area
Riverside, yeah.
facilities,
Okay.
and not including.
Yeah, not the entire,
areas.
not the entire district.
Yep.
Oh, good point, yes.
That's
Yes,
an
very
oversight.
good.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep. So what do you want? What's your preference? Okay.
Understand. Yeah. So this goes right to the DEC
Yes.
when we're done.
Correct.
There's a letter drafted for Mike's signature certifying the apportionment to the Commissioner of DEC.
Okay.
I didn't throw in an indoor accolades earlier. Ken Ham from DEC has been also great
Yeah.
in reviewing those documents that we've sent over, asking questions, and indicating to me that he believes he can pretty quickly turn around the approval because they've been reviewing it right along.
I hope people can appreciate how many different entities were involved in this and
How much work went
how much work went into it, and it wasn't just cut and dry.
A lot of moving parts.
Yes, there were.
And a lot of spirit of compromise on both parts. I mean, I attended some of the meetings.
Yeah. So,
Looking for a motion?
yeah. Do you want to look for a motion to approve the
I would
apportionment?
love to make that.
Mr. Finkel? Mr.
Stover?
Stover?
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Unanimous.
So moved, thank you. And I'd like everyone to note, too, that there are only 4 board members here. We have had the resignation of the 5th. And as of last month. Thanks, guys. Good luck. I'll miss all the phone calls.
So if I could quickly
Sure, go ahead.
go to these two quick housekeeping items, fiscal housekeeping items on page 84. Resolution approving a revised budget for the Hudson River area for the period July 1, 2012 through June 30th, 2015, and establishment of state share. Essentially, this resolution is recognizing the need now to include an amount chargeable to the state for the current period and then going forward for the entire cycle. If you would look at page 87 quickly, this is pretty small print, but say midway down, there's a very small line says less chargeable to the state.
Highlighted in blue, right?
If you
Not
have,
on
Yes,
black
yeah,
and white
yeah.
copy.
Okay, well.
Or light gray.
so it's highlighted,
Yeah.
and you can see for the first year it's 841,583, 918, 142, and 800,380 for the 3 years. And as our general counsel pointed out, any amounts received in excess of that will be booked against the amount that we set as the past due amount due the state, and that is in the back to page 84.
Say that again?
Any amounts
Okay.
received from the state in excess
Of their-
let's say for this year, if we receive more than 841,000, that amount will be charged against a receivable that we're going to set up for the past
Oh, okay.
3-year
Got it.
state share, which is $2,638,048. And until that amount is satisfied, none of those amounts in excess of the whatever is stated for the state share will be credited against
Right.
the counties. Or
Okay, that's fine.
now, do we expect to receive? We don't know. Whatever we get, we
Keep
book keep
our
and
fingers crossed.
So the resolution does two things. One, it recognizes and reflects the state share. It also, in the second to last, be it further resolved that the amount chargeable to the state for the previous 3-year cycle, 09 to 12, is set in the amount of $2,638,048.
Okay, got it.
So that's the first resolution.
Let's take care of that. So I'll need a motion to approve the revised budget for the Hudson River area and establishment of the state share.
So moved. Mr. Stover.
Second.
Mr. Hayes.
All right, first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you. Then quickly on page 89, I have a memo that's basically a motion, and again, this recognizes the need to restructure the Black River area note. It's not even a restructure because the resolution that was adopted, and that was the original resolution 11-2408, set forth the amount that the Hudson River area would be borrowing from the Black River area, in what accounts, and that it would be repaid. It didn't say over 50 or 20. It really was kind of silent on that. I think there was thought at the time that depending on what we actually received, there could be an immediate repayment, but that was then, this is now. So what I'm asking the board to make a motion is to authorize the chief fiscal officer to, number one, to amortize this note payable that was, that we put in place and adopted pursuant to that resolution 11-2408, and to do it over a 30-year period. And also to give me the authority to manage the payments, particularly in the first 3 years, but to manage the payments forever in terms of the cash flow needs of both watersheds.
Got it.
And as an example, the initial payments from this note, if you look at the 30-year amortization, it's $10,000 and change a month.
Right.
We're going to be paying during July, August, September, October, $371,000, which would normally be 4 months, $40,000. So and we're doing that because it's cash flow driven.
Right.
We are going to continue to do that throughout this budget cycle, the next budget cycle, and future budget cycles. So I'm asking the board to authorize me to do that, and
Well, it had to be done to get us back on firm footing. So.
And if you could make.
So I have you need a motion?
Yes.
I don't know.
Mr. Finkel,
So I need a second?
Mr. Stover.
All right, first and second. So,
Any-
all in favor?
Aye.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stover.
All right. So that's it for the apportionment, right? We can
I believe so.
Send it to the DEC, we can, once we get their approval, send the bills.
It's a dotting the i's, crossing the t's, getting originals,
Okay. I know it was a-
certifying resolutions, delivering by hand.
For the record, my first meeting involved the phone call from Washington DC informing us of the FERC ruling. So this is all I've been doing since I've been on the board.
Well, I got here 2 meetings before you.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure I would have taken the job if I knew what was
Oh, yeah. I had no idea what was going on when I heard that phone call. Now I do. All right. So now we need, I think,
Mr. Chairman, thank
report of the
you.
executive director. Yeah.
You will find my report on page 20. At this point, and considering what we've just accomplished, I think it's worth me saying, and then some, that the entire staff of the regulating district has really stuck with it for 3 years or more during difficult or uncertain times. And they've done a heck of a job. And I will say that there's no doubt in my mind that we wouldn't be at the point we're at now if senior staff, and in particular, I'll name them, Rob Fulton, our chief engineer, Rick Farrar, our chief financial officer, Rob Leslie, general counsel, and myself, if we hadn't stuck with this, the task at hand to get us to this point. And I think that for everybody, when I speak of everybody in the regulating district, I can say I haven't ever worked with a better bunch of people. So
Not
I
only
think the
that,
board should hear that.
Amen.
I agree, and not only that, people have to be reminded that you had your regular duties also perform the entire.
Well, and that's what's next.
Yeah.
It's not. This doesn't create a lull. There's plenty to do, and then some. We will probably get even busier from this point forward. Again, back to my report. There's. It's on page 20. Pretty succinct. Obviously, most of my time was spent dealing with issues related to the Hudson River apportionment. Did receive a call from the Watertown News Channel last month that was, it was just a little humorous. We had a sunny day and we had some rain, and they noted the river came up in Watertown. I said yes, the river did come up. Because the snow was melting, and then it recovered, and we went back into a cold snap. The only other thing, and I want to mention this now, is that we have another policy that I will recommend that the governance committee review next month. It is a domestic violence in the workplace policy. Carol Wright had taken the lead on that, and we do have approval from the, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember the office within the state that.
OPVD.
Office of Prevention of Domestic
That
Violence.
sounds a little.
That makes sense, thank you. I apologize for not remembering that.
Mm-hmm.
They have approved our policy, but of course, we have a policy on policies, and our policy on policies says that
Right.
the board needs to adopt a policy.
Right.
So it seems appropriate that it would go to a governance committee meeting at the April meeting. If and we'll put it on the agenda if the committee so wishes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I don't have any this time.
Nope.
I have none.
I even fielded a couple of phone calls from newspapers. How they got my cell phone number, I'll never know. Okay, thanks. Mr. Leslie?
I'd simply note the judgments in favor of Fulton and Hamilton County both remain outstanding. However, hopefully next month that will change as a result of what the board has done today. On January 17, 2013, Albany County Supreme Court Justice Joseph Teresi ruled against the regulating district in the Northern Electric Power Company in South Glens Falls case. You probably better know that as Borlex.
Yeah.
The Assistant Attorney General, who I mentioned earlier, noted that that was a pretty decisive win for the plaintiffs. Nonetheless, the Attorney General's office does believe that there are grounds for appeal. I should note that this is the second negative decision we've suffered with respect to the Headwater Benefits refund issue. We now face judgments totaling $3,244,475 plus interest at 9% on those decisions. The AEC case, the Albany Engineering Corporation case, is under appeal to the Appellate Division 3rd Department. The AG also expects to appeal the Borlex case in the same manner. We also face another pending Headwater Benefits refund suit from New York State Gas and Electric, seeking another $771,667 plus interest. Just something to put in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
The U.S. District Court challenge by NIMO continues. Our special counsel, in that case, Justin Driscoll, who replaced Dave Cherban, still indicates that there is no new date for the District Court scheduling conference. It had been set for late October, but was postponed due to Hurricane Sandy. Project Sunlight. I sent an email out to staff and each member of the board regarding the regulating district's obligations with regard to this project, which is part of the PIRA 2011, the Public Authorities Reform Act. I think it's 2011, whereby any contact from an outside entity with regard to one of 5 categories has to be reported onto a database. I am the reporter. Both myself and Mike will have the ability to go in and look at and modify, if necessary, our reports, the district's reports totally. So if somebody calls you about a procurement, they want to get you to buy something, they want to advocate for you to change a rule or regulation, they want to change your view with regard to a quasi-judicial hearing, one of our access permit hearings, or require some change in the way, say, John administers a work permit. Many of those, if not all of those contacts, are reportable. With the email I sent you a PDF or a PowerPoint presentation, kind of giving you the technical parts of this and giving you the substantive parts of it. And with that, a form that you should fill out and submit back to me anytime anybody contacts you. There's also a form that I need you to fill out and submit back to me indicating that you have taken the training, that you've viewed the PowerPoint presentations and that you generally understand what you're looking at. This is a big push by the governor, and we've had numerous meetings on that over the last several months. This is Sunshine Week, and I would not be surprised if this database goes live sometime this week. Certainly sometime soon. I guess from a an embarrassment standpoint, you don't want to be in a position where somebody has contacted you and you haven't submitted the report, and somebody goes and looks at the database and notices that the regulating district has had no contacts. Certainly you don't want to have a contact be made public and then not have reported it. So keep that in mind. I have a certification from Rick. I'm still looking for a number of other certifications. And feel free to ask me any questions if anybody has.
Okay.
If you're not sure of where this is going, let's talk about it. I guess that's my report. I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Not at the moment.
Yeah, but
Nope, I don't even, thank you. I'll get on that Operation Sunshine when I get back. Okay, thanks. You have the floor, Mr. Farr.
Mr. Chairman, my report can be found on page 22 through 90. And on page 90 are the expenses for the month. There's one for Thomas Dover that the board needs to approve.
Right.
So we'll take care of that.
All right, so I need a motion to approve the traveling expenses for Mr. Stover.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes,
I will second it.
Okay,
Mr. Finkel,
all in favor?
Aye.
Tom?
Do I approve?
You'll have to,
well,
yeah.
well, yeah, we need it.
Yeah.
And again, there's no
No need for
technical
We have-
reason for you to abstain.
Unless you're lying about it.
I don't lie about it. Even to my wife.
Just a couple items on page 22, my overview. As I've indicated, cash flow reports now do reflect this consent that the board adopted today. I am including a new data element on cash flow, which is not on the reports that you have, but I did bring
Okay.
a version which will indicate the average fund balance for any particular year, and I will highlight particular disbursement items and/or receipt items as we go through, particularly this year and next. So that'll be included in the reports. I'll probably make a better effort of getting your reports in color. This report is very difficult to read when it's not, so we'll try to figure that out.
All right.
One other item, this is the fourth quarter for the state's fiscal year. And we kind of have to work along with them, particularly as it pertains to minority women in business enterprise tracking, utilization tracking. The director and myself were on a conference call with, I believe, the executive who is not part of MWB but handles it from reporting to Cuomo's standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about some strategy around, now that we're funded. That was the first thing that we reported is, number one, utilization down, no, because there's been no funding. Going forward, we now have opportunities because we have funding. They are going to assist us in identifying MWBE firms that are particularly in the area that we deal in, and that is hydrological, whatever, dam engineering, as Mr. Fulton likes to explain it to me, a layperson. So they're going to help assist us in that, and then we're going to do we're going to look more closely at the current firms that we have to make sure that we aren't dealing with minority or women-owned firms that are not certified. And there's probably a reason why they're not certified. The process is difficult. But we don't have to certify them. We just got to point them out.
Okay.
So if the state can certify them, we're already using them, we get credit. So that's another thing we can do. And then we're already making a much bigger push on getting our primaries to use secondaries that are MWBEs, and we've had a lot of success in that, just given the most recent couple solicitations we did. So I just wanted to mention that, and we'll see what happens going forward.
All right.
That's my abbreviated report.
Thanks. Good. Any questions for Rick?
No.
Okay. Let's get to the chief engineer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report begins on page 91. Very quickly, Mr. Clark alluded to a little bit of runoff at the beginning of February. That was the case. Brought up our reservoirs for a brief period of time, but thankfully for the rest of the month, remainder of the month, it was pretty dry. Precipitation was low, below average in both the Hudson and the Black River areas. And as a result, as you can see on the 5 graphs that are included, show the reservoir, each of the reservoirs coming back down, and now here, March 12th, we are, I'd say, appropriately positioned and appropriately timed too, given the weather that we're expected to receive over the next couple of days, and the rain and the warmer temperatures, to receive the spring runoff. So I think things are running quite smoothly with regard to the reservoirs, and I don't forecast at this point anything too extreme, but certainly there's might be some more colder weather to come, but at this point I think we're well positioned to begin receiving the runoff.
Okay.
Some other real highlights, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I had an interesting question posed to me yesterday. As I mentioned to you, I thought the board would get a kick out of this. Somebody who actually boats on the lake, Sacandaga, who's aware of the low levels last year, and was asking whether or not we had started refilling the reservoir yet. Just the snow melting?
Yeah. Well, actually, it actually
I think
hasn't.
people actually believe that we actually start pouring water into the lake, but I don't think we do that.
Yeah, no. In fact, we continue to make releases, and there's been a little bit of an increase in inflow. We're right down at the target elevation for Great Sacandaga, and have been for a couple of days now. So
It is very common to get questions. Do you guys have the gates closed yet?
That's a better question.
Which really alludes to are you filling the lake or not?
Right.
yeah.
So I have to take the time to explain to
I was posed
everyone that asks.
I was posed that question up to Fulton Chain a few times last year as to how we were going to fill it. I told them our backup plan was we're going to ask everybody to put garden hoses out from the camps.
Fire hoses. Go
Fire
through
hoses.
this big time.
So, okay. Thanks.
So, you're welcome.
All right. The Hudson River report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report starts on page 125. We did a little bit of riprap last month, about 140 feet of shoreline using existing rock. We processed 731 access permit renewals. I'm not sure what percentage we're at right now, though. With them all back, got to be close to 80.
My number was through February, so it doesn't reflect anything we received. So 317,000, I know we're probably 15, 20,000 beyond that, I would think.
Yep. So the deadline's March 15th for the renewals, so it's coming up at the end of the week. The senior administrative assistant and senior field assistant are continuing with their operations of the new filing system we're putting in place. And last month, the boiler at the field office in Sacandaga developed a leak and had to be replaced. And then 2 weeks later, the furnace at the Indian Lake House went, so we had to replace that also. So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
The furnace up there is old anyhow.
Yeah.
I'm sure. No, I don't have any questions. Any questions? Good job. Thank you. Ms. Wright?
Thank you. My report is on page 131 and 132, and things are running rather smoothly from the Black River area. We have had our share of breakdowns also. I'm not going to put Black Cloud out. We're working on. The field staff is presently every other week doing our snow surveys, and on the other week, they're in the process of renovating our shop garage so that we can do more work inside the garage, the light up that we didn't get our proposed garage built. They are also in the process of enclosing the automation on Gate 5 in Stillwater Dam Gatehouse. And the office staff are busy not only doing the normal duties, but inventorying and updating our EAPs and following up on outstanding assessments. So I have a little report to share with you two tomorrow. So,
Okay.
if you have any questions,
What happened to that garage, the proposed garage?
we're waiting for our money back so we can
Okay.
afford to build
We'll
it.
see what we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions for Ms. Wright? Okay. Any other discussions from the board on anything? I'd like to thank staff for all they did. Please thank Mr. Day from the board for his work. I know he probably will be glad when we're all finished.
Yes, he's expressed that a few times.
I'm sure he has. I don't blame him. So it'll be kind of nice to get back on a little bit firmer footing so that we can start moving forward. Get back to the business again. And as I stated to Mr. Farrar when I got here, hopefully that's the last time I ever hear him say the phrase, "Our cash flow will run out on."
Don't expect to be saying that.
I hope not. All right, so I need a resolution to schedule the next board meeting in the Warren County Municipal Center, Lake George, on April 9th, 2013.
Mr. Hayes.
Second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Finkel.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Again, reiterate, like we could use another board member.
That has been expressed.
I'm sure it has, and I'm going to put it on the record that, yeah, we need some sort of safety net. Okay, so I need a motion for adjournment.
Make that motion.
Mr. Hayes.
Second?
No, sir.
Mr. Stowe.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.